Hi, everyone. Welcome back to a visual arts community for teachers just like you, elementary art teachers. I'm Sarah Rising, moderator for this group, and this is the third in a three-part series relating to art room methodologies. We're going to continue talking about art in the art room. So take a few minutes, watch the videos, participate in the discussions, and remember to subscribe so you don't miss any of the discussion posts or any of the other good things that we're sharing. I'm looking forward to hearing your ideas. As before, I have the presentation to share with you all, and then at the end, I will link the PowerPoint version of this so that you can access the videos and any other documents that are linked within. All right, here we go. Let's talking about art. In the first part, we talked about artist statements and enduring understanding and essential questions. And this time around, we're going to look at student reflection and art discussion. Student art reflection is where the kids can go back and evaluate their own work. I came across this infographic and as I was researching for this topic, and I plan to implement this next year. What it is you can see is there's a list of 10 items on here that help kids take a look at where they are with their work. And while it's very involved, my idea was that you know how we always have those kids who blow through their work in 5 minutes and it's a project designed to take 2 days maybe. Something like this will allow those kids to go back and reflect on their artwork. And also for those reluctant students who aren't quite comfortable and also finish their work rather quickly, it will help them go back and look at items up here. You don't have to post all of them, and I'm not planning on using everything, but I like number 5. I've shown this artwork to others and asked for feedback. I love that it has the number 6, art has personal value to write about in an artist statement. And I've worked through an experiment and solved an artistic problem. Those are the top 3 that I think are super important and can help our kids focus and reflect on their work. Teaching the art of reflection is the struggle is that kids don't do it because maybe we haven't taught them how. And thinking about what if the students knew from the start of the school year the value of their work and how it relates to maybe 2, maybe 3 essential questions. For example, what are the characteristics of good problem solvers? If students keep the essential questions in the front of their thinking, think about that impact as they document the progress in their learning. I'll also talk to you a little bit later. I've been doing some reading about these. It's from Project Zero, and it talks about visible thinking routines. And I'll talk to you about that a little bit later. If you want to go back and dive into it a little deeper, I've linked right here. If you click on this link in the presentation, you can get to the information about this. I'm also going to talk to you guys in another webinar about student portfolios and how you can use those to reflect on student artwork. Things to remember when you're looking at reflection and talking about reflection. Let me move my face. 3 things. Essential questions are the questions that students will remember. Students' ability to address essential questions, empower them to work through the artistic process independently, which is what we want. And finally, essential questions are used to engage learners in thoughtful meaning making to help them develop and deepen their understanding of important ideas and processes that support the transfer of learning. All these things are what we are trying to achieve through the teaching of visual arts. Next, I'm going to look at art discussion with you. There's a lot of information here, so I apologize in advance if it seems like a lot. Hopefully you can just come back and look at this if this is something you want to look at further. But I talked to you about the idea of visual thinking strategies, and it is an inquiry-based strategy for all grade levels. The goal is not to teach the history of art, but to encourage students to observe it and then talk about the art and back it up with evidence. What I've learned from the websites, which are linked here, is that the first thing we need to do is share an artwork. We kind of are already doing this, but this is a little more involved. And so you're going to share some art with some students. They recommend not abstract art and ask the students to look at it closely and silently for a minute or two. And then you're going to start the conversation by asking the class what's going on here. What we want is students to respond back, and then you, as the teacher, kind of summarize the responses using conditional language. The next thing that happens is you're going to ask the students, what do you see that makes you say that? And it encourages the student to back up their statements with evidence. They're already doing things like this in reading, so we're just encouraging this in a visual environment. The last thing that you want to do is ask the students, what more can we find? And it just continues the conversation. Some of the tips that I've learned is during the discussions, link the responses together and compare and contrast what other students say. Let the students look closely and reason out the responses rather than discussing facts. Don't forget that the goal is not to share information, but to encourage critical thinking. And then lastly, when the conversation ends, continue your lesson, linking the content with comments that students made. Maybe posting some of those things and then refer back to them as the students are applying some of those concepts to their art making. So speaking of art, we all know that students want to look at artwork and they have a lot to say. Your classroom can become a place where lots of discussion happen, vital information. And I've included this link for 5 tips for meaningful classroom art discussions. Talks about how you can lead a discussion, gets your students thinking about it. So this is for teachers, and hopefully you'll have some time to come back and take a look at this. Helping your students talk about art, you want to provide them with speaking prompts. Questions like, what techniques did you use to create this? What inspired you to create this? What does this artwork mean to you? Art vocabulary is a major challenge, so provide students with a glossary of terms using a word wall. When you first introduce verbal communication about artwork in the classroom, consider leading with your own examples. One of the recommendations I came across was showing your students a piece of artwork that you've created and share with them the method that you used to create it. What were you thinking when you created it? What challenges did you encounter when you made it? Sometimes I like, while I'm using maybe a document camera at the board, talk about the thoughts that are in my head out loud as I'm working. And it lets the students see that thought process going on inside your head. Maybe it's similar to what they're thinking. This is just a little chart. I'll let you come back to it. It's really 5 easy steps for talking with children about art. Find real art. It's always a richer experience than looking at a reproduction. But as we know, that doesn't always happen. Be open-minded, encourage careful looking. Open-ended questions are always engaging. And then look for an opportunity for related art making, which is what we do in our art lessons. I'm going to share with you next 3 different ways that you can use 3 different techniques to get kids talking about art. This is a low tech using simply post-it notes and sticking those notes right on top of the artwork. It could be other students' artwork. It could be artwork that you're studying, but using the sticky notes and having kids make comments relating to things like the context of the art, the elements of art, the emotions that you see in the art. So again, here's a low-tech version. The next one that I'm going to show you is using Jamboard. And if you watched a previous presentation on classroom technology, Jamboard is housed within Google, and you can use it to critique art, and you can use this activity to build the language of art and literacy. So what I did here is I created a Jamboard, and you guys can go back in the presentation and click on the images and make a copy to use in your classroom. There's a lot here. This might be a lot for other people, but the cool thing with Jamboard is I can draw lines on the actual Jamboard from the word value and then draw lines and make those lines and kind of um, annotate what's going on in the artwork. So I've included the elements of art in yellow, the principles of art in orange, where, when, why. You talk about the media used, talk about big ideas like the theme, subject, point of view, and sources. You can make this as simple or as complex as you'd like to. If you don't use Google in your program, there are also lots of free flowchart makers out there. This one that I did here, I used diagrams.net. It's really a flowchart making program, but I used it again to, and you can see I've just used it like a flowchart, but drawn lines about things like variety and color and get kids thinking about art that way. And then Canva also has a flowchart maker. Both of these are free programs if you're not using them now. They're kind of nice. So you have three different versions. You can use the sticky notes, you could use Jamboard, or you could use something like diagrams.net or flowchart maker to create things to get the kids talking about art and using that terminology and developing that visual literacy. Well, that's it for our second part of talking about art in the art room. Maybe you can share with us, I'd like to pose the question, how are you using the language of art in class with your students? And if you wouldn't mind, share with the group your ideas of what you're doing, successes, and maybe your struggles. And if you have documents that you'd like to share, we'd love to see those as well. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys have a great day. See ya.